Kari Brown,
Right.
welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Thanks so much, Mahan. It's great to be with you.
Kari, I'm really excited. I've seen your leadership and your impact in the community. I've gotten a chance to see your energy, your enthusiasm for the work you do, and even the interactions we have had have been energizing for me. So I know they will be energizing for everyone who gets a chance to listen to some of your life story and background. Would love to start out, Kari, first and foremost with whereabouts you grew up and
Sure.
trying to understand the impact of your upbringing on you.
Yeah, great, great. Well, I was born in the Boston area, actually born in Boston and grew up in the Boston area um, uh, in the early 70s. Um, and I'm an only child to a black father and a white mother who um, were the best parents, are the best parents, still married, I think, 53 years of marriage or something. Uh,
Awesome.
and grew up in the Boston suburbs, attended public schools, and um, I come from a family of educators, and I think that helped to shape, some of my values and what I thought I might do as an adult. Um, but had a wonderful childhood and very grateful for all the opportunities that I had in getting the start that I did.
Now, Kari, as the society is becoming, at least in the US, more diverse and we're becoming more comfortable dealing with people with different backgrounds, I imagine growing up in the 1970s with a black father and a white mother was more unusual than it would be
Yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah.
How how was that what was that experience like for you?
Well, Mahan, at the time, right, I didn't have anything to compare it to. So um, my awareness of race and difference, my own difference, began when I was about 5 or 6, or, I'd be out with my dad and recognize that, the reactions that we got, the looks, the comments, I could tell there were exchanges, with people that upset my dad that I didn't really understand. And I think that, started to happen, like as I said, around 6. There were definite times, and this, coupled with being an only child, where I felt uh, isolated, alone, or that I didn't really have a group, and I developed skills and where I could sort of flow in between everyone's group, and yet never be fully, a member of anyone's group, if that makes sense. And that had some benefits too, and it's given me a worldview um, that I really appreciate now. And but definitely some hard moments. Boston, was there's a lot of racism still today, but particularly in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. So um, but again, I go back to my what I said at the beginning. It was a wonderful childhood overall.
Yeah, and that's outstanding. So now, as you were going to school, you also got involved with basketball. Were you naturally good at it from the beginning? What drew you to basketball, and why did you get so excited and so involved with it?
Well, I I loved all sports as a kid. Basketball was my favorite. I'm tall, so I was always one of the taller kids. I'm 6'5" now, and so that helped, right? Gave me an advantage there. But I just loved the game. I love to compete. I love um, the team aspect of it. It was just the cultural aspect of it too. I just everything about the game, and it gave me great mentors and experiences and growth opportunities. My first leadership opportunities came through basketball, being a captain. and I would never be doing the things that I'm doing today had I not had some of those opportunities through basketball. So it was terrific.
So it must have been devastating for you to be cut from your basketball team in ninth grade, Corey.
How did you know that? Yeah, that was devastating. It was devastating. I cried. It was, I was crushed, right? Uh, but it also, I had a moment where I said, "Am I, is this going to be it? Am I going to give up? Am I going to quit?" And like, I had dreams of playing in the NBA, like lots of, naive kids, and so was I going to have to figure something else out? And I decided, no, I'm gonna work at it. I'm gonna prove them that they're wrong. And I had an opportunity to later in that season to get put back on the team and gradually worked my way, from the bench to becoming one of the best players. Over time and with a lot of hard work and hitting a growth spurt also helped.
That helps, but it's interesting because a lot of times I think setbacks in life make some people resentful, other people better as a result of the setback. They work even harder.
Yeah, I wasn't going to let that stop me. And what, you know, I gained from that experience was, at other times of my life, it's, well, I'm just going to I'm going to try something else. I'm not, and, I think sports helps to teach you that you get knocked down a lot. And once you know that you can get back up, it becomes a habit, right? You just keep doing it. And I tell people in basketball, you're great if you make half of your shots, right? You're one of the best. So keep shooting because the next one might go in, right? You got to think like the next one's going to go in. So that was something that, my coaches helped to instill in me and that I've tried to pass along to others.
So now, Corey, I would love to get your thoughts on youth sports before
Yeah,
we go on. One of the things you said is you played basketball, and I know you continued with it. But before we get to that, I've been thinking about the fact that my girls love volleyball. One of them was able to make it to club volleyball, one of them
right,
wasn't able to. But
right.
I think about the amount of investment some kids have, whether it's in volleyball or
Yeah,
basketball. By the
yeah,
time they are 10, 12, we're not talking about college level athletes.
right.
So, and I reflect on the fact that while I'm sure there are people without that investment
That's
who
right.
are supremely gifted, they
That's
can
right.
compete,
We're
but it
missing.
puts a lot of other kids at a disadvantage, and would love to
Absolutely.
know some of your thoughts about that.
You know, it's one of the areas where underinvestment and the inequality, the income inequality that we have is reaching down, to children and taking away some of the best. I just talked about how all of these growth opportunities that I had, I might not have had those, had there not been coaches in my town and some of these things available that were not club sports. So my kids are in, these around the same ages as yours, Mahan, and I see how this divide is happening around income lines. And, it makes me think that we've got again, some of our priorities wrong, right? In thinking about monetizing youth sports. Youth sports can be one of the ways where, we're really investing in our young people. There's so many life lessons to be gained from sports. And if we really want to be competitive on a national, international stage, we can't just be, investing in the kids who have money, but we have to invest in all of the kids. And so on a number of levels, it's disappointing what I'm seeing in youth sports as a parent and as someone who, spent a long time in a previous career working in youth sports.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I'm hoping we would be able to think about and change is that the other thing this has done is that it has divided kids among those socioeconomic lines, that there are already those divisions anyway,
Right.
along neighborhoods and schools. Sports, to a certain extent, was bringing more kids together
Right.
from
Right.
across different socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, even with respect to that, there are
Yeah.
divisions that I see. But you continued in your basketball, you studied at Tufts. What
Hmm.
then got you to go to Finland to play basketball, and what was that experience like for
It
you?
was really, yeah, I was really, really fortunate to have someone on my team had his father was the president of a club team in Finland, and it that was my first job out of college to be a pro basketball player in living just outside of Helsinki, and what an experience that was. I got to um, fulfill a dream and be able to play basketball for for a living, and it really helped me grow up. I spent a year on my own in a foreign country, where I didn't speak the language, I didn't have any other connections, and it forced me to toughen up a little bit, and I definitely had some hard experiences during that time. And again, this is one of these moments where I think I was tested a little bit, and being able to draw on some of these experiences where you know I I knew that giving up was not the answer, right? And because there was a point at which I wanted to quit because it was going so I thought so badly, and it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life.
So what was that, Kari? What were some of the breaking points when you were in Finland?
Well, I was dealing with some nagging injuries. I was lonely. I what I didn't realize is that in December in Finland, it's very close to the Arctic Circle. As it was getting light at 9:30 in the morning and dark at 3:30 in the afternoon, and I developed seasonal affective disorder, which I didn't even know had a name, and nobody diagnosed me, but I figured it out after the fact. I realized that I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and being inside and get out um, and be more active. And my team helped me do that, connect me to opportunities to get involved in the community. I got involved doing a little bit of teaching and coaching, and those became things that I knew that I wanted to pursue later. And I developed some other strategies for dealing with the language barriers, and all of you know, not rocket science really, just coming up with another approach, and it ended up making all the difference.
Now, did you aspire to play in the Finnish leagues and then make it to the NBA, or
Well,
was it Finland was the end point for you?
I knew that the NBA was probably not going to come calling for me. Um, I hoped that I could have a longer, European career or some career playing overseas. Um, but that I got 1 year was, you know, I'll take it.
And it is, as you said, it's a unique experience to live in a different country. Now, Finland is a very homogeneous
It
society.
is. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
how was fitting in Finland? What was that experience like for you?
Well, they're really, they're quiet people, which kind of fit sort of my New England, upbringing. Folks might say cold. Um, uh, the weather also sort of resembled some of the worst of New England weather. um, but there were a lot of things that I really came to appreciate about Finland. They were a very patriotic people. They believed in national service, which was something that every Finnish citizen, even though they haven't had a war since I think been involved in any military issues since World War II when they were invaded by the Soviets, but they still are very committed to, everyone goes through national service. And I think that engendered a sense of a communal aspect that, I don't see here in the US. And I think part of that is enabled by their homogeneity, right? They all feel like they're in it for one another because, it could be their cousin or their nephew or whoever, right? And I think we don't have as much of that today. But I was really impressed with the educational system, and they were great people. They were great to me, and so yeah, a lot of that experience has come to help me, as again I said before, shape some of my worldview.
So as that worldview was shaped, you came back to the States and you got your master's. Just curious though, what sparked your interest in education and social justice work, which you've pretty much spent your entire career in, Kari?
Yeah, well, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do when I came home, and um, I was sort of testing the waters in a few areas, and one of those was coaching. And I found that I really loved coaching. I did a little bit of coaching at the college level, and then I coached basketball at the high school level, and really, really loved working with those young men. And I thought that I had found my calling. I thought that I would be a high school history teacher and a basketball coach. It was really working with some of our players off of the court that helped me see um, the importance of education, or help me see myself being involved in education. I saw that some of our players who were trying to qualify um, to get a minimum score on the SAT to qualify to play college basketball. At that time, you needed a combined verbal and math on the SAT of 700. And we had several players who, despite having good grades, could not break that score. And it just didn't make sense to me that these really hardworking, intelligent young men who, could memorize the other team's plays that we were going to play, next Tuesday, uh, were at about a fifth or sixth grade reading level, in some cases. And those two things just didn't align for me. And it just was, I thought unacceptable that we have, people who are so willing to learn and our education system was failing them. I thought that I could make a difference there. And so that inspired me to go to graduate school, and got me on the path that I've been on, for the last 25 years.
Now that's a challenge, Kari, that we've had for as long as I can remember. And a lot of people have talked about it, but not much has been done about it. Why do you think that is? Where in the school system, we still have students, in many instances, athletes, as you said, very intelligent, very capable, who are able to go on, even graduate without being able to have some of the fundamentals of reading, writing, or math taken care of.
Well, these are big, I think, systemic issues here, Mahan, that, um, I think it goes back to our priorities as a country, and we don't really have the investment in public education, um, or even some basic services to create a level playing field that will, enable, you know, young. Let's be clear: it's Black and brown young people who um, are missing the most in terms of equal opportunities. And our education system is based upon um, uh, you know, taxes for our home values, right? That determine what school systems get, and we have young people who are starting out behind, and these, you know, this crosses all of the systems that touch our young people, from health to housing, to criminal justice to education. You know, just a significant lack of investment in our communities, and until we start to see these as being our universal problems, it's going to be hard to deal with them, you know, at a system-wide level, right? We don't talk about these things really. Even when you look at our, um, you know, election cycles, these aren't the top topics in our election cycle, right? And I just don't think that we have a collective investment uh, as a nation to address these problems. So we do have a very committed nonprofit sector. We have very committed educators and, you know, working in the public sector. But we're treating the symptoms in a lot of cases, and not the causes.
Yeah, it is interesting to me, as you were saying, we don't see it as a collective problem, in that in many instances, we even don't view it at the region, state, or county level. We look at it as our specific, school that our kids go to.
That's
How
right.
is that school performing,
That's
rather
right.
than caring more about the broader community and then the impact that this gap in education has. So, how did you end up then becoming involved at Capital? What was then Capital Partners for Education?
When I was finishing my master's program, was looking for opportunities to serve in the nonprofit sector. I was looking for mentoring organizations, and um, came across Capital Partners for Education, who was uh, going through a leadership transition, and I was actually really more interested in a role working, you know, directly with young people, and not in a leadership role. The organization was so small that they had a one position, and that was for interim executive director. And um, I agreed to accept an offer to be an interim executive director for 4 weeks, thinking that I would, you know, get a little bit of experience and then move on and do something else. Well, after 4 weeks, they renewed me for another 4 weeks, and that happened four times until finally I was named the permanent executive director uh, at the beginning of 2002. So this was happening in, you know, beginning in September 2001, um, and I was the only employee there for a time, and, you know, gradually grew the organization. Um, we're now, you know, this is now 20, we're 22 years later, and we're serving 10 times as many young adults, and, you know, we have 31 employees and more than 500 volunteers, and, you know, things have really taken off in recent years. But it's been a gradual process over many years, and you know, an incredible journey for me that has been the experience of a lifetime.
So it has been an incredible journey, and your incredible leadership in growing the organization, Kari, and growing its impact. One of the things I love about organizations like the one you lead at what was called Capital Partners, now we'll get to the rebranding, is the fact that growth is not just return to shareholders, it's return to people's lives and return to the community. And you've been able to do that. So, if you were to reflect back and give advice to other, uh, 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 whether young entrepreneurs, executive directors, and leaders wanting to grow their organization. What are the key factors in addition to your smarts and good looks? What are the key factors that contributed to this very significant growth and impact?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, Mahan. I wouldn't have known. I mean, uh, let me say it this way. I didn't have the aspiration when I started to grow. And if I had, I would have I would have done things differently, meaning I would have designed a more scalable model. Uh, and so that would be my advice. If your goal is greater scale, you need to build with that in mind. We built an organization that was meant to be a small community-based organization that was getting significant impact for a small number of young people. And we decided, maybe in my eighth, ninth year that, uh, and it was really I who, came to this conclusion, but a lot of our supporters were saying, you know, this is an amazing organization. Its only problem is that it's too small. And you're working in an area where, there's vast inequality. You should be more of a solution. And that began to really resonate with me. So I we've still grown. I told you, 10x and all of that, but um, we would be multiples larger had we really built the organization for scale. So that I think is, if you really want to scale, that think about your revenue model, and think about how you're going to develop, all of your evaluation systems to be able to demonstrate, your impact, and so that you can prepare to do it at scale.
And that's one of the interesting things, Kari. I've over the years I've been very involved in many entrepreneurial startups and angel capital and venture capital. And when companies look to raise funding for profit ventures,
Yeah.
they always have to have a uh, the hockey stick
Uh,
of their growth um, and impact. And I'm always curious why a lot of nonprofits don't have that same mindset, because if it is
yeah.
great work,
Yeah. Yeah.
then scale should be a part of that to impact more lives and more people
Yeah.
rather than being happy at a small level. So I think a lot of the ambition goes to the for profit entrepreneurial startups. Some of them make it, many of them don't. While the nonprofits, in many instances, are happy on incremental changes from year to year.
Yeah. I think that's very true, Mahan, and that was, true for me. I came, with a background in social sciences, and it wasn't until a few years later that I, began taking business, MBA courses and things that sort of sharpened my skills in that way. But I began, sort of with the community uh, uh, view, and that view has just broadened over time. I think that's very common of the people who were drawn to the social sector, um, which is healthy, right? I mean, I think that these are the people who are most interested in serving. Um, Maybe the question we should be asking is, not how can we build larger nonprofits, but how can we get out of the business where we're relying on nonprofits to do things that our society should just have built in. That's the thing that I would like to see us get to.
Yeah, you want to develop a system where there isn't a lot of breakage, because in many instances the nonprofits are trying to fix a breakage which is not as effective and costs a lot more money
That's right.
than if we avoided that breakage in the first place.
That's right. Exactly right.
Now, throughout the years, you've also tested different things. Some have worked, some haven't worked in scaling. you tested an e-mentoring software platform, and it sounds like that didn't work out. How come? Because the concept of it makes great sense to me. Following on the conversation we just had, scaling the impact, not just being happy to reach and touch a few or even hundreds of people.
We missed on, I think one or two important aspects of our analysis, and it ended up being a mistake that it took years to, to grow out of, and was a great, another, I think, learning opportunity for me as a leader to realign the organization. First undo the mistake, figuring out um, how can we adjust, and how do we communicate those adjustments to all of the various stakeholders in our community, and then how can we get back to where we want to be. That process took time, and those were some important lessons. But again, you know, in leadership, and I say this to our team, we're all going to make mistakes. And, I think my board understands that. They've made mistakes in their businesses and in their lives. And, it's what you do after that is what matters, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Corey. And I think, if anything, we need to speed up the pace of making some of those mistakes.
Yeah,
And when I talk about it, I categorize it in two different types of mistakes. Some are experimental mistakes,
right.
meaning you have a hypothesis that something's going to work. You go for it, and that hypothesis proves incorrect. It
There,
doesn't work. We need to scale those mistakes or have many more of those mistakes. Successful organizations do that. Some are mistakes of execution,
mhm,
right? Where things aren't done well. We need to minimize those types of mistakes.
sure.
So I'm glad to hear that your board has been supportive of you experimenting and seeing what can help the organization scale. Some work, some don't, and those are lessons that are learned. Would love to know, as we're talking about this, just what is it that Capital Partners does for these students? What are the services that are provided?
Yeah, and this would be a good time to note too that and you alluded to this, we rebranded in July to, after 29 years as Capital Partners for Education, we rebranded to Spark the Journey. So that's our new name, which we love. And we have historically, I'll just say a little bit about where we came from to get to where we are. We have always been an organization that is committed to Black and Brown young people in the DMV, and we've we've supported them by mentoring and with some educational support so that they can have economic mobility in their lives as adults. In our early years, we did that through scholarships to enable our students to go to private high schools, and provided mentoring. The mentoring aspect was something that we have taken to much greater scale. We found that scholarships was a harder thing to scale, and we began focusing more on students who attend public and charter schools and going to college and now in workforce programs. The thing that we do best, Mahan, is that we pair our students with mentors, adults who care about them. We surround them with a support system that helps them persist in school and at important transition points that are really vital for success. So think about the transition from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, the transition from the 12th grade into what am I going to do next? If I'm going to college, and I'm the first person in my family to go to college, I need some extra support to be able to navigate that process. There's some technical things There, are some just coaching things that that young people need, encouragement, helping them persist. Um, we do that with young adults in a variety of transition points, but helping them persist and prepare for economic mobility. That's the thing that we do best, and um, I think we're really proud of the success uh, of our students over the years. They've graduated about 3 times the rate from college um, as many of their peers um, around the country, and we have many who come back and become mentors and uh, uh, donors, board members, people starting their own nonprofits, contributing in many ways, and we just are trying to get more and more young people and expand our reach today.
Kari, I would love to understand it a tiny bit better, and also a couple of concerns that I've typically heard from people. One, understanding it better, is it that the same individual mentors a student through this journey, a young person through this journey? Are there different people that mentor them? How does that process work?
It it can be either, Mahan. It's often, I think, the typical experience for students who are in one of our programs that is a multi-year experience, which most of our programs historically have been, um, about a 4-year time period where the young person is enrolled. And in those cases, they're usually getting more than one mentor. So we ask our volunteers to make a 1-year commitment. If they're successful, if the match is successful, many of those end up doing another year. And we've had many mentoring relationships that have lasted beyond the official time in the program, and they're 15 years later are almost like extended family members. Um, so we see it in a variety of ways, but uh, 1 year or two is probably the most common.
Now, a concern that I sometimes hear, Kari, is that it's great that a program like this can add value to the lives of the students that get involved with it, but there is selection bias in that the students that raise their hands or are willing to participate are already the ones who will be more likely to make it through the different hurdles, and the ones that need it the most are the ones that are not going to volunteer and
Yeah,
are not going to participate in the program. How do you address that?
yeah. No, I think that's an important question, Mahan, and one that we have thought a lot about over the years. I would say in our early years that we were identifying exactly those people that you mentioned. They were the high flyers, right? The ones who raise their hands, or the ones who are picked first because they stand out. And it's important to be able to provide resources and extra support for those, because we need high achievers, and they end up often being the only black or brown person in their classes and as they go on in many of the rooms that they go into. So we were proud to do that. We still do some of that, but most of what we do now is looking to identify those who would not otherwise get any sort of extra support. So we focus on a group that we call the academic middle. Some people call them the forgotten middle. Um, and, you know, GPA wise, they're sort of at the peak of the bell curve, right? And, in our lower income communities, there aren't a lot of resources for these young people. Um, their counselors are generally, and teachers are focused on those people who raise their hands, or those people who need remedial support, who are behavior issues, right? And if you, like my players 25 years ago, are quiet, polite, you know, not causing a stir, you can you can sort of fly by under the radar in a public school system. And our society misses the contributions of those folks. We need to do more to get them involved. So that's where we really see, our focus being, and we are trying to reach as many of those. And let me tell you, Mahan, that's the bulk of Black and brown youth in the Washington D.C. area. I mean, those are the ones that we need, who need more support.
I love hearing that, Kari, because it's something that is needed. And in some instances, I've been familiar with a couple of nonprofits that, in part because of the funding and because of the measures associated with the funding, have played those games where the funders look for 100% of the people, for example, to make it on to college.
Yeah,
So if the funders look for that, you're going to look for the students. Yes,
sure.
they can benefit from some of the guidance and support, but the ones who are most likely to then go on to college, because that's what the funders are looking at. So
Yeah,
sometimes I'm a big advocate for measures, by all means, believe me, but
right.
measures that matter. And sometimes I found with nonprofits that are meant to help the community, they get in a cycle, in part because of the funders,
That's right.
to it. I mean, the measures are real, but they know how to massage the front end to make sure they meet the measures at the back end.
I think, Mahan, you're touching on one of the shortcomings of the nonprofit sector is, our reliance on funders and their priorities. Um, and, you know, I always say, no money, no mission, right? If you can't. So I understand why, many take that approach. I don't begrudge them necessarily for focusing on those. I think those are worthy people. Again, I think we should be looking at our system and saying, is this the best that we can do as a society? Does this really align with what we say that our values are? Um, in a lot of cases, it seems like the nonprofit sort of built in as uh, a component of our broken sort of capitalist structure today, where more value going to, you talked about shareholder value, right? If that is the main goal of our society, when it comes to business, at least, the nonprofit sector is going to feel some of that as well.
I like the way you express it, Kari, and it brings to mind one of my favorite proverbs. It's a proverb slash story of African origin about uh, kids falling in a stream, and two people saving the kids at the bottom of the stream. Then all of a sudden, one of them starts leaving. The other one says, "Why the heck are you leaving?" Says, "Go upstream, find
Upstream,
out who
right?
is pushing these kids into the stream."
That's right.
So yes, it's outstanding to save the kids downstream,
That's right.
to help them, and it's necessary for us to do that. However, we cannot keep from asking, what is it upstream that is getting these kids or throwing them into the stream in the first place? So I appreciate you thinking about that. Are there things that the listeners of the podcast, whether people in business or in government or nonprofit, can do more
Yeah.
upstream? Downstream,
Yeah.
they can support organizations like yours, but what needs to happen upstream to reduce the number of kids that need to be saved?
Yeah. Mahan, you're asking the right question here. And I think this is a question that isn't posed to folks like me enough, right? Or maybe isn't posed, to our leaders in general enough. And I think, of the three groups that you talked about, it's the business community I think the government will do what the business community sets as the priorities, um, and the nonprofit community will make do with whatever resources that we have. But we sort of live in a element of scarcity, right? And we're sort of driven by the whims of of business, which who are the donors, for the most part. So I would like to see, I we mentioned shareholders, and I would love to for the business community to think more broadly about their responsibilities and leadership position, when it comes to the communities that they're in, and thinking about you know the whole of the communities and not just the shareholder value. So that would be, where I think the starting point.
And that's a great starting point. It is a hard one on a lot of different levels, Kari. We celebrate the funds contributed. We don't celebrate the uh, investment that is made ahead of time, or whatever that's done ahead of time that has reduced the need for funds to be contributed. It's a little bit like talking about the many pandemics that people say had been prevented in the past. No one celebrates the
Right,
fact that whether it was Ebola or whatever else, that it was prevented from
right.
spreading after COVID spreads or whatever else. Everyone's like, oh my God, how do we deal with pandemics? So it is an important conversation for us to have. But I appreciate your understanding and awareness of the need to both address at the here and now, which is really important for us to do, and to continually have conversations in the community with the businesses about that upstream element of it. Now, one of the great honors of life, on Kari, is to be recognized for the great work that one has done by others. You've gotten a lot of recognition, including receiving John Thompson Legacy of a Dream Award. What is that award all about that you received in 2022? And as a Georgetown alum, it
Yes,
means a lot to me also personally. So what does that
yes.
award stand for?
Well, Mahan, this was, I think one of the greatest honors that I've received in my career, in part because of the specific meaning, of the people, you know, for whom the award was named. So John Thompson Jr., hopefully most people know, was the legendary basketball coach at Georgetown, for about 25 years throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Um, and the university named the award after him, to honor one person in the community, who is doing a lot locally to give back, leading a nonprofit organization. So I got that honor in 2022, um, and it was special to me because I grew up really admiring John Thompson, um, and also the honor was bestowed upon me on Martin Luther King's birthday, and so it's called the Legacy of a Dream. Um, and the presentation was always on Martin Luther King Day. So, two of my heroes, that connection was, um, just as I said, a great highlight for me. I was really grateful to Georgetown for it.
And it is recognizing another hero in our community, and that's you, Curry. So I'm really happy that you got received that recognition for the silent work you've done over the years in the community. I talk a lot about leadership, and there are a lot of what I call selfie leaders, Curry,
Yeah,
people who are at the center of every image. And now with selfies, that's pretty easy to
sure.
do, but the mindset, the communication, everything is about them. So it's beautiful and great to see leaders that make a difference in the community who are not selfie leaders. They're the ones that deserve to be recognized.
Yeah, well, I am one of those leaders who, uh, I am not a self promoter, by nature, right? And so I think as a result, even throughout 20 years of leadership, uh, there are many people who I meet and say, how come I never heard of, the work that you're doing before? And we're trying to change that now. As I've mentioned, we're more ambitious, um, and that's I think my role is expanding in that way, which is terrific.
And it is a hard balance, Corey. I do admit the fact that there has to be an element where you have to be a face to promote the cause, to bring people to it, to
Mm-hmm.
make a difference. And at the same time, not step over the line and make it all
That's right.
about you.
No, it's certainly not about me. It's about important people, in our community who aren't getting, the resources and support that they deserve, and we're trying to do something about that. And it just so happens that I get a lot of the attention for it, but we deploy, hundreds of volunteers every year. We've got an amazing team who's doing the work every day. I'm the cheerleader for everybody.
So as this cheerleader, you've been doing this for almost 30 years now. Or Capital Partners was
That's right.
doing it for almost 30 years. Why, after 29 years, decide to rebrand, as you mentioned earlier, and change the name?
Yeah, well, we listen, 3 decades is a long time, right? So we evolved a lot. I think our program model, I could name probably 5 distinct, what I call pivot points, where we made adaptations to our model. We're a different organization than we are, and we didn't think that our name really reflected who we are today, and who we want to be in the future. There was some confusion also, people thinking that we were in private equity, or some type of financial services with the capital
You
partners
have
part.
more capital than you know what to do with.
Right,
So
that's right. And so we got plenty of questions about that. So it was time, and we just launched a new strategic plan where we're doing more work mentoring young people who are preparing for the workforce, and thought it was an opportune time to also finally rebrand. So we're excited about being Spark the Journey, and to us that means our organization can ignite future opportunities, but our young people really chart their own pathways to economic mobility. We just want to give them that support and guidance so that they can find their path on their own.
yeah, I love that you serve as an igniter and as a catalyst.
That's right.
They are the ones that are on the journey, and they're the ones that make it happen for themselves. You support that. I love the way you think about it. And I'm sure the rebranding becomes supportive of the strategic plan that you have, which is an important piece of this. Now, you go through all of this and then you decide to take a 4-month sabbatical, Kari. What
Yeah.
brought the sabbatical around, and
Oh,
how could you take 4 months off?
it was time, Vahan. It was time. I had 21 years with no more than 3 weeks off at any given time. Even my kids were born, and the pandemic really, quite frankly, took its toll on me, and I was ready. I needed a break, and I'm grateful that my board was really supportive of me and offered the sabbatical. And boy, was it an amazing experience. It just it was the refresher that I needed. It gave me, perspective. It gave me the opportunity to just recharge. I spent time, visiting with family and friends, and a lot of, rest and relaxation on my own, at home, and, came back with a, uh, more motivated than ever, and with a real appreciation for the experience, the opportunity, and I've become a bit of a advocate, proselytizing for sabbaticals. I think that you know too many of our my peers in the nonprofit sector, um, are burning out, and don't feel that we have the license to raise our hands to take that time. And I um, we're building in a sabbatical policy at Spark the Journey. Something I believe in. So I'm it was great for me, and I hope others can get the opportunity to do it as well.
I'm happy to hear that, Kari, and I work with a lot of senior executives in business and some in nonprofit. And I don't think I have seen this level of um, pressure, emotional
Yeah,
health issues,
yeah,
and
yeah,
anxiety in my career,
yeah,
most especially for many of the nonprofit executives of color.
yeah, yeah,
It's been a
yeah,
rough a couple of years on laid on top of what had been a typically hard role anyway. So good for you for seeking it, good for your board for supporting it, and I've no doubt your thinking is more fresh and energized, so you have an experienced person with the energy of a an excitement of a new person
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
leading Spark the Journey, rather than either a burned out person or a fresh new person without any understanding and
Right,
experience.
right, right. And we had it also gave other leaders on my team opportunities to grow, and so it's a healthy business practice, not just for the nonprofit sector, but I would say, everywhere. If your chief executive steps aside, the show has to go on, right? People are going to figure out how to make things work, and in our case, it led to some better practices. And so when I returned, it was not about, okay, what things that you were doing can I pick back up. It's like, okay, you've got it now. Let me, I have more time now to focus on higher order things that are going to move the needle farther and faster, for the young people that we support.
So, Kari, you're back, energized, new strategic plan. If we talk with each other 5 years from now, and we're
Yeah,
going to see each other before then, and
yeah, right.
but if we talk 5 years from now, and you have really been able to scale the impact further and have achieved the strategic plan and done more with Spark the Journey, what will be different? What will Spark the Journey be like 5 years from now?
Well, Mahan, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you that we are doing some things and working with partners that I think can lead to some real breakthroughs and growth for us. So I co-founded a collaborative called the Talent for Tomorrow Alliance. It's a group of uh, five nonprofit organizations who are doing either college success or workforce development work, with a similar population of young adults, and we're collaborating and pooling our resources, um, to get better outcomes and be more efficient in doing it. I think you know we can grow a lot faster that way. I am also working on partnerships with local governments, um, and businesses. And so, what I would like to see 5 years from now is growth in multiples of the reach that we have today, and um, to be on a pathway to um, you know being able to have a reach a much larger um, share of the young adults in our community. And if we're successful with that, we have the ear of leaders in the community. I think we also need to be thinking about how we can change some of the practices that affect our young people, practices in K-12, practices in higher ed, practices in the way we train our young people for entry level to the workforce, and putting, the business community, giving the business community more opportunities to make some adaptations as well.
It is, and I appreciate your leadership toward that, and I agree with you that, and these are complex problems, and they don't have easy answers and easy solutions. But it is important for all of us to be at the table, engaged, understanding that it is up to all of us to solve the issues. It is not acceptable to let it go on as is.
Right.
We can and we will have the opportunities to do that. And I look forward to your leadership as you're doing that. Now, on the other hand, you're also a proud father of two kids.
That's
You've
right.
been married to your wife 18 or so years
Mhm.
now. As a father of two kids, what are your aspirations for their education, their growth, and the future that they will inherit from you, Kari?
That's a great question, Mahan. I am so fortunate to have two amazing kids. They're 14 and 12. They attend DC public schools. They have, their whole lives so far. Um, and I want them to have all of the opportunities that I had and more. I think they already have more exposure to things that I didn't, maybe for better or for worse, with the internet. Um, and to really chart their own pathways, much like I said for the young people in Spark the Journey. I think what was great about my parents' approach to education was that they, sort of left it to me to find what inspired me. And I think um, when my kids find that inspiration, they will latch on to something and really pour themselves into it, much in the way that I did. But it's not for me to decide what those things are, right? So I want to provide a well-rounded education to them, and I think we're off to a good start.
I have no doubt they have a great role model in Yukari. So
So
that's
thanks.
outstanding to hear. I do have to say also, sort of as an aside on the education front of it, um, uh, for the podcast, I'm interviewing some leading thinkers on artificial intelligence and
Hmm.
its
Hmm.
ongoing impact. And one of the interesting things is sometimes people are scared about artificial intelligence taking people's jobs. It will displace some jobs.
Yeah, yeah,
But the more concerning factor that many of the AI experts that I talk about is that it is going to magnify the differences even more. So it's not that it's necessarily going to take away
yeah.
jobs. However, the people who are capable and have certain capabilities and certain access will be able to do even more.
Yeah,
So it's going to
yeah.
scale those differences.
That's pretty consistent with the way technology has changed things over the past generation, right? We think, was it a generation or two ago where, there was a manufacturing sector and that, you know, um, provided stability for many families, and now that's gone, I think technology is a big part of that. I can see that trend continuing. I guess the question is, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Exactly. And that's why we need to have the right people at the table talking about it, because we can do things about it
We can.
upstream. Now, sort of on the fun side of it, Kari, you've
That's right.
had a lot of unique experiences in life, but there is one that I think most people would be jealous when they hear of, and that's you got a chance to play basketball with President Obama at Camp David.
Yes.
You can tell the jealousy coming out of my voice even when I'm
Yeah.
asking the question. What was that experience like, Kari?
Oh, well, that was in my top five, experiences in life after, births and weddings and those things. I was a big Barack Obama fan, and when I found out that we had biographical things in common, and then when I found out that he was a basketball player, and there was playing in a game that some of my friends were playing in, I that was on the bucket list. So being able to play that day was just really an experience of a lifetime. Never forget it, and something to tell the grandkids about, right?
So you uh were you able to beat him? What was that like? You have to dish the details.
Well, I think that we won. Um, I think we won the games for the day. My team president was on the other team. Um, the president was very effective in trash talking and getting. He got all the calls his way. So no one really argued the calls against him. Um, but at the end of it, we went, you know, back to DC, and he got on a helicopter to solve some of the world's problems. So it was an amazing day, and as I said, one that I'll never forget.
Yeah, I bet it's even fun hearing about it, let alone experiencing it and recounting it, Kari. Now, Kari, you have been an outstanding leader of your organization. Now, Spark the Journey have been recognized with awards, including John Thompson's Legacy of a Dream Award. You're still a young man. I'm sure you're going to get many more awards and do many more great things, which is more important than the awards that you get for the great things that you've done. When you reflect on leadership, how do you work on improving your leadership? And are there leadership resources you typically count on and refer to others? So, two questions. One is resources you recommend, and two, how do you continually work on your own leadership?
Um, those are important questions, and I've been you know really fortunate to have people who've invested in me, so I've been able to um, participate in. I could probably name you know more than 10 leadership programs that I've participated in. Leadership Washington, one that I know that we share, but many others, right, over the years, and those have been, I think, intentional investments both on my part but also from my board. Um, so that I think is important. Finding those resources, and boards and leaders need to make sure that their leadership teams are getting those trainings, those opportunities. You not only learn a lot from the instructors in those situations, but from your peers. And that, I think, has been another part, is surrounding myself with, sort of an unofficial advisory group of people who are always there to, bounce, for me to bounce questions off of, to learn from, observing what others, the people who I look up to do, and then, to be a, to remain curious and to be a student. One of the, I think, most important values that, I picked up throughout my education was the importance of being a lifelong learner, and that's something I want to instill in everyone, my own children, to all of the young people that we reach, is that that's one of the greatest gifts of education, right? Is being a lifelong learner. That means that we as leaders can research and learn and talk to, and think about how where do we need to grow, and what is AI going to do, not this year, but in 3 years, how can I be thinking about that? And leaders always need to be asking those questions, and that's something that I devote time to every day.
And that's outstanding. I totally agree with you that it is important for us to have that learning mindset and growth mindset, even more so as the pace of change picks
Yeah,
up and becomes even faster. I had a conversation a couple of years back with Jim Dyke. Jim Dyke, I call him Mr. Chairman because he was
yeah,
chairman of a lot of organizations that I was involved with, and he had been Secretary of Education in Virginia. And Jim talked about his passion for education. And one of the facts that the worst thing you could do during the period of slavery was to try to educate a slave,
that's
because
right.
the slave owners felt education was the most threatening thing that you could give to another human being.
That's right.
So we have that opportunity now. It is up to all of us to educate ourselves, re-educate ourselves, and do exactly what you said, Kari. Address the issues as we have them right now, those people in the stream, and together move on up in the stream and figure out how we can prevent fewer people, make sure fewer people fall into that stream. I really appreciate you, Kari Brown, your leadership, and you taking the time to share some of your background, upbringing, and leadership lessons with the partnering leadership community. Thank you so much, Kari.
Well, Mahan, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks so much for having me on. Really enjoyed our conversation today.